This woman knows Angela. Y'all give her a hand. She's going to introduce her first speaker.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good to see you all here today. And our first speaker is Mrs. Alexandria Cunningham. She's a kindergarten teacher at the University Charter School in Livingston. She's a native of Northport and a longtime resident of Livingston. She holds a BS and Master's of Education from the University of West Alabama. Honoring her late father and paternal grandmother, Mrs. Cunningham is an Alzheimer's Association advocate. Cunningham started her own children's book publishing company, Inspiring Honey Publishing LLC, with an imprint called Funky Fresh Nerds, where she publishes YA novels. She partners with the King's Kids Foundation, a local Monroe County charity, where she donates books. Her newest work is Hot Tea and Laughter. Everybody give it up for Mrs. Cunningham.
Thank you all so much. I'm really blessed to be here, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me because I think it's important for you to know how I reach others about where I came from. And I'm going to need you guys to interact with me if you will. So when you're traveling, before we had to print MapQuest, before we had GPS, we had MapQuest. So now that we have GPS, when you need to go somewhere, what do? You put in your GPS. Many times, I even, forgot where I parked my car, but if I look at my phone, your GPS is going to tell you to get to your car, right? So the world's way is the world's GPS, the global positioning system. I remember traveling home from Huntsville, Alabama with my husband one night. The GPS was on because I had it on because initially, I wanted to figure out how to get to the interstate. My husband likes to turn it off. I like to keep it on so I know my ETA what time I get home so I can count my hours before I have to be at work the next day. And so I took it down, as I usually do, and suddenly I awakened because the car was no longer in motion. Like a baby, right? Drive baby, if those that have children can go to sleep. And so when I got up, I see that cars were turning off of the ramp and going down a one way. And I'm like, why are they doing this? So something up ahead was happening, but because my husband didn't want to listen to the GPS, he missed the exit when I told him to turn a while back. This is before my dad. I was like, hey, it said go here. He's like, I know how to get home, run the interstate at this point, right? And so the GPS suggested an alternate route to get where we need to go, and my husband didn't take it. And so as I go back and I turn the GPS on, he sees another exit and he takes it, right? So how many times do we ignore God's perfect system? Right. Where we ignore the GPS, just like, God tells you where to go, what to do, but we don't listen. Because if we're listening, he always reroutes us. I originally am from Northport, Alabama. I grew up in a fairly awesome environment up until I was in 5th grade when my parents got a divorce. We lost our house and we moved closer to Main Avenue in Northport, and it was really hard for me. I was bullied because of the way I talked. Kids were mean. I wanted to commit suicide. My sister's best friend introduced us to the youth pastor who lived on our street, which was Pastor Bobby. And from there is how I really found God. Like, my mom always talked about God. I grew up in a household where if my mom isn't going to church, I'm not going to have to work. And so being able to have that connection and relationship, I was always in the Word. And I'm still in the Word today because of that. So thank you. I'm just going to go ahead and get that out of the way. And so because God gave me a new GPS, I continued to seek Him in everything I did. If it wasn't connected to the Word, I didn't want it. If it wasn't connected to what I was supposed to be doing, I didn't want to do it. Wherever God was, I wanted to be. So my first relationship stemmed in the church under my youth leaders, my youth pastors, connections with friends, where I went, what I did. Even courting. If I felt like this cannot possibly be my husband, I was out, right? So I continue to follow God's perfect system in my life. And I started using my giftings. I started tapping into my gifts, like what am I good at? So before I ended up in Livingston, I was going to Shelton State where I had 4 different majors. And one day I just, I was like, God, I'm outgrowing my environment. And that's really what it was. I'm living in a 2-bedroom apartment and I'm like making connections with people at Shelton State. So one day I got a ride to work and my brother's friend said, why don't you go to West Alabama? And I said, what is that? what is West Alabama? So I'm Googling while I'm at work on my break, and I'm like, okay, this seems kind of promising. So I started talking to my advisors at Shelton, people that I make connections with. They weren't assigned to me. Okay, they weren't assigned to me, but, you know, those are people I built relationships with. And so in turn, these people knew what West Alabama was. They worked at West Alabama and even went to school there, so they connected me with people I needed to be with, relationships. So with that happening, I started making plans. I packed boxes before I had an acceptance letter. I was moving by faith. I said, okay, these are people that I made relationships with, I'm connected with, and I want to do what it is that God wants me to do, but I know I can't possibly do that in an environment that I'm now outgrowing. So in a 2-bedroom apartment, at first it was just my mom, and now because at this point I'm in college, my sister left home, my brother left home, and situations happened, everybody moved back to a 2-bedroom. So I knew I had to leave. So that's where God's perfect system came into play. I'm like, all right, God, I don't know where West Alabama is, but if you go, I go. And that's exactly what we did. So my first year at West Alabama, I started making connections, plugged into the church, different churches. I just went to different places, and because I didn't feel like home, I said, okay, I compared everything to my church here in Northport, and I realized you can't do that. Because different seasons, God is showing you something different, and you have to step out, and that's when I learned to use your gift, is step out. I've always been a talker, used to get me in trouble at home and at school, and I remember my middle school principal told me that one day your mouth is going to get you in trouble. And for a long time it silenced me, and I stopped talking. I stopped answering questions in class, and then I remember people said, you know, when did you become Alexandria? It used to be just Alexandria. Because I got to a point in my life, I stopped caring what people thought. I had to rely on God and just continue to think about who He called me to be by reading Jeremiah 29:11 every day. If I wasn't reading Proverbs, I was reading Jeremiah 29:11. And so when I got to Livingston, I was like, okay, God, we're Livingston, living, we're going to live. So, you know, I'm tapping into things that I know. So when I was in high school, I was in color guard flag with the marching band. So part of me going to West Alabama is that my instructor from high school had just gotten a job at West Alabama. I got a scholarship without even having to audition. Wow. Talk about God's perfect system. He had already made preparations for me before I even got there because of relationships. Okay, I was like, you kind of tell me what I need to do next. I'm trying to, don't want to talk about myself too much. But being at West Alabama, it was a place that I told everybody, I like my 3 traffic lights in my simple town. You keep me out of trouble. But I stayed in the Word. So I went to a lot of churches, and I found a church that would really, help me. And so when I moved to West Alabama, I changed my major to education, where now I am a teacher. I teach kindergarten. So these pictures are very significant, so I want to talk about how we reach. So it's like, okay, we have a lot going on here. So as you see, the children that's with my assistant teacher and I, those were our students last year, and this is us with their mom at a women's conference. As I was teaching, which is not a Christian school, it's a charter school, which we're kind of free to do things, but it's a public school. One of our vocabulary words in my lesson was grace. Well, I use that word a lot, and my students learned it. I gave them grace when they couldn't finish their work on time, so I gave them extra time. I gave them grace when they lost their things and we had to go around school to find it because mom, was going to yell at you when you couldn't find your jacket. I used the word grace so much that my student went home and used grace. His mom said, brush your teeth, put on your pajamas, get your school clothes out. Did you pack your lunch from the containers I have in the fridge? He looked at her and said, Mom, Miss Cunningham gives us grace every day. Can you try to give me a little grace? And she texted me that night and she said, Allie is what she comes. She said, it messed me up. Because how many times does God say that to us? Like, when we are rushing through life and He's giving us grace to do the things He called us to do. And so having that student, I built that relationship. And there was other kids on there. Like, there was 3 children that was on my slide before this. I taught the sister first. We built such a strong relationship, and I want to tell you why, that I was requested to teach both of her brothers. This was one of my challenging children. As a teacher, we all face them. I don't call them problem children, I call them challenges. Because they're challenging me to figure out why they're crying out, right? So this child in particular, and I love them, she came to school one day and she handed me a piece of paper. She drew me in a house fire. My student teacher at the time said, you know, did she make it out? So on the picture, my husband is lying on the floor and he's dead. And my student teacher asked me, well, did Miss Cunningham make it out? And she said, no, I locked the door and then the roof fell in. So immediately now I'm hurt, like, why did this child draw me in a house fire? Like, God, what is this about? So come to find out the root of the issue, I went to the office, you know, told the council what happened. They said, what did you do to that child? I said, I told her I hope she has a great day. And she drew that. Well, come to find out she watched the news with her grandmother that morning and saw a house fire on TV, so she was expressing what she saw to the person that was supposed to sue her. Because all this child knows hurt. So when I went back to get the paper to put on file, she ripped it up. You guys won't believe what she drew next. It was a picture of me and my husband holding a baby. And she drew God in the sky, and she said, this is God looking at her, this is your baby daughter. Me, I'm like, okay, God, is that a demon? Because how does she know? Like, you know, because at the time, my husband and I were struggling, you know, to have children, and I'll end up going through a miscarriage shortly after that, but the fact that she knew to draw that. So building that relationship with her, we talked about God a lot. She went to church. So days she would give me most challenges, she would say, I don't know why I'm acting like God's not in my heart. And I was like, but honestly, you know, her name, I wrote your last name. She said, God, I know that God is in your heart. And so she would talk about God, and she would come to me even after I taught her in kindergarten. She's in 4th grade now. And we would pray every morning. And because of the relationship and the time I spent with that child, I was requested to teach her siblings. And I said, God, what did I do? You know, but I had to go back and think about God's perfect system. I built relationship. I built trust. And because I built that, this child is going to continue to come to me about everything. So I use my gift. I use my gift to teach because I'm not a minister, teaching is my ministry. And you steward well was not working well. If this child is challenging, I had to find the root of the issue to help her with that. So how does it connect? I've always been good with words. As a child, I wrote journals. When my mom made me upset, I wrote it in my diary. I tore it out, put it under a rock in the yard so it can just, you know, get into the soil. And I ended up writing books in 2018. And because of that, now at the school that I am in, I help my students, I call them my students, but I teach kindergarten. These are high school students. They wrote a book called The Wisdom Writers after one of the girls saw the movie The Freedom Writers. Well, this book was about things that they face, talk about recent generation. They wanted parents and the community to know what they're dealing with because nobody's listening to them. And so I used my gift of writing and publishing, and I walked them through the writing process during my planning period. I was just going to run and get a sound anyway. I mean, I had time. So I went down the hall, and I talked in the writing process, and we talked about how to use it the right way. And so they ended up producing this book, and it has changed so many lives, including their parents that never knew issues that they were dealing with, including what we call our school moms that do not have kids, but we have these children. Every year, my husband and I pick up kids, whether they're kindergarten, college, because for a while I taught color guard with the band. It can be taxing, but then I remember my why. Because God's perfect system, He led me to this area because He saw them. For them to be in high school, and I teach kindergarten, but you come down the hall to show me your report card. There was a picture a while ago at a softball game. It meant more to that child that I was there than her mom. Her mom was going to be there, but because Ms. Cunningham showed up, I know that she cares. Yep. And so, this is how I use my gift to reach the generation in my school. Sometimes we want to veer off our routes, and we remember that God has connections and places that we need to be. My first year at my school, it was in December, I applied for a job here in Tuscaloosa. Not for a selfish reason. I wanted to be close to my dad who was living at the VA, had Alzheimer's. And I said, you know, I drive up here, I read them stories. Who's going to be there to give them a glass of water? I applied for a job and I didn't get it. And when I went to that job interview, I said, I'm overqualified. The things that they want to do, I already do at my school. So why would I leave? The very next month, my dad passed away. God's perfect system. He knew that was going to happen, so then I was going to be in Tuscaloosa by myself because all of my family completely dispersed. So how do you reach this generation? Ask yourself, who am I assigned to? Sometimes you get frustrated when you want to save your sister or your cousin or your mama, but you're not assigned to them. You want to save them and say, oh, I saved my family. That was not your assignment. That's why you're tired. That's why it hurts you when they won't go to church with you. You find out who you're assigned to. You build a relationship. You be present. And when you're present, they pick up what you're putting out. Let me explain to you what that means. I have who I call my playmate. She says, our family's so complicated. My assistant teacher was everybody's favorite sub. She subbed for me one day when I took a self-care day and found out that who I call my spiritual godmother at my church is her best friend since kindergarten. So we call each other, that's my auntie and I'm her niece. But some days her daughters need a big sister. So that's why they say our family's complicated. So when I say you build a relationship with them, there's no judgment. If they need to talk to me about something, I'm not going to condemn them, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it with the word. And you be present. If they want me to show up to a school dance and chaperone, and I cringe because I just want to separate everybody with a stick and back up, but I'm there because they need me there. Parents trust me to be there. Because if I'm there, nothing bad is going to happen. I can't see everything, but they trust me to be there. So being present. Now picking up what I'm putting out. This is how they come to the place, building a relationship with these students. I always felt like I dress old. And so my niece said, TT really doesn't dress old. She dressed modest, but we're supposed to dress like that. And in my head, I'm like, she figured out what I'm putting out. You went into the game again, I know something, So I didn't say that to her, but I'm like, okay, she gets it. And there's going to be a time where I can insert myself in a conversation and say, hey, your mom told me what you said about the clothes that I wear. Thank you that I don't dress old, but I dress modest. So let's talk about what that looks like, and not just on Sunday. Because her church is very Pentecostal. And so she'll wear jeans. Nothing's wrong with that. It's not going to bring close to God or not, in my opinion, to each his own. But she does it because her grandmother's a pastor. And she has to be prim and proper when she sees her. But outside of that, who are you separated from that? And that's what I constantly teach them, is that who are you when no one's around? Where's your integrity and where's your faith in God? Because we're walking billboards for Christ, and people see your life and they want to know, what must I do to be saved? So this is the GPS that I've been operating on. Not the one on my phone. Thank God MapQuest is gone. We have an easier way to get where we need to be. But God's perfect system is how we're going to reach this generation. Because when you follow Him, you can't miss. And that's all I have.